breathe. There's only now. What is past is behind us. Untold things ahead. What is it about ancient Japan that gives it the power to captivate so many? This unspoken draw from cultures around the globe that directs us back to this small set of islands in the Pacific. Whatever it is, Ghost of Tsushima caught it, wrapped it, and gave it to us as a final gift in a console generation that saw games, the stories they tell, and the ways we inhabit them mature into its own. Irreplicable, dynamic, and evolving, slicing out its piece of the art world. The story of the ghost, both in the pixels and the meta surrounding it, is about legacy. It's a love letter to Japan, to classic cinema, to video games. Here we are at the brink of a new console generation and a new era of gaming. So let's take it back. When I got a PS4 at GameStop, it came with a choice between 4 games. One of them, Far Cry 4, had pretty box art. Then I got home and downloaded whatever demos I could find. One, I think it was called Tokoiden, something like that. Anyway, it had a samurai-like vibe, but actually disappointed me because it made me wish there was an expansive, open samurai world out there to explore. It's hard to talk about Ghost without referencing games like Assassin's Creed, Breath of the Wild, and even Red Dead 2. But in a similar manner, film historians can't really talk about Westerns or Star Wars properly without bringing up Kurosawa. For the first time in forever, I'm getting vibes of Karat as I ascend the unfamiliar path up a mountain. And I think that's a good thing. It's a beautiful thing. It has Uncharted-level cinematics, Metal Gear Solid 5, and that the world makes changes based on how you play. It has good buddies like Final Fantasy 15. It's got the world beauty of Horizon. It's always the prettiest hour of the day. It has the natural sound of Breath of the Wild, making you really feel like you're out in nature. You have the connection to your weapon and its upgrades like in God of War. It has great stealth like in Assassin's Creed. It can sometimes have the pace of Red Dead 2, and I mean that in a good way here. It has the limitless world of Death Stranding, where every distant mountain is somewhere you can go. And it has the gear upgrades of the Tomb Raider reboots. I don't think it would benefit anyone if I took this dramatic story and reduced it to a synopsis I spend several minutes spoiling and butchering. So, for the sake of the review, let me set the scene in 3 broad strokes. 1. Samurai Jin and his uncle Lord Shimura defend their home from a Mongol invasion. Number 2. Jin nearly dies but is rescued by a thief named Yuna who teaches him the sneakies. Number 3. Jin sneaky fights the Mongols and his uncle don't like it. Like so many aspects of the game, the story borrows the best of its influences, especially the samurai films of Akira Kurosawa, and replicates their overarching dramatic beats. Jin's companions comprise a fantastic ensemble, with Yuna, Kenji, Ishigawa, Masako, Norio, Taka, and Yuriko. I think the key to a good ensemble, be it Ocean's 11 or Community, is when characters have one main trait that you can identify immediately, but are well-rounded enough to give some dimension of real people. It was great acting, and I say that because of this. I never thought about it. The characters just always were. Ishigawa was always Ishigawa. It goes back to that thing of they have that specific thing that characterizes them, but they also have layers, like real people. Okay, so there are these superb biwa guys that recount legends in a calligraphy style and then lead you to new gear and such. These are always cool to find. It's amazing how they told stories, like about his mother, through so-called side quest combos that can happen out of order. but it totally fills in the painting. Like starting with the outline of a mountain of a tree and having the details slowly filled in. As an example, Misako talking about how Jin's mother was ill, and Yuriko talking about the same thing on the other side of a map that you could encounter at a completely different time. I'm not describing this well, but the storytellers are like geniuses. And the dumber I am, the more they seem like geniuses. So, yeah. Spoiler alerts. I cried when my horse died. Like, sobbed. Never did that before, so I guess it was an emotional awakening. And yeah, that was straight up never-ending story sad. I'm sure this joke has already been done. But when Taka died, I was like... At the very end of this game's story, I'm pushing the cart with Shimura, and I was like, oh, the ghost is Batman. He's the Dark Knight. He's the hero that the people need, but that they don't deserve, or something like that. He's Batman. One of the things you can collect are Mongolian artifacts. Now, I typically abhor this type of thing. After reading a dozen or so of these entries, what they ate, how they treat their animals, etc., I actually started to see the Mongolians of this game as real people and not as a mindless horde. There's a lesson in there, and I think that lesson is I should read more. Like I said before, the sound of nature here is very Breath of the Wild. The wind blows the grass. It's like you hear the breath of the insects. Fauna always murmurs just out of sight. Using the flute to change the weather. The haiku song, so great. But most of the time, the music here it's good. Alright, so when died and the song over the credits, those are amazing. I wish there was more music in open worlds. I wish I could hum the melodies that play when you're wandering the open world. I wish I knew those better than I know the encounter music or the now we're going into the sneakies song. You know, those songs. So when you liberate a farm, it's like they heard the legend.
He studied with Sensei Ishikawa, didn't he? No. He learned from Sojoba.
Now that's polished. That is attention to detail. And it sounds so good. I expected Assassin's Creed Odyssey level graphics, but it unexpectedly leans slightly towards Breath of the Wild, and it's beautiful. It looks like they're trying to mimic live action, but the colors are like, But you can play it in black and white if you want. I love the little poof animation when you pick up supplies. So satisfying. Alright, the photo mode. I'm sure you've probably heard a lot about this photo mode. I like to call it cinematography mode because, what makes it better than other photo modes? Control. It's the combination of the settings that you have, like the difference between shooting a movie on your iPhone, which you can totally do, by the way, or with an expensive, DSLR. You just have a lot more control, so you can come up with new things, and it's coupled with the fact that it's in a beautiful setting, so there's really not a bad spot to take a picture. I have hours and hours and hours of footage that I did in this cinematography mode. You can put on some music, you can do a slow pan, zooms, control the weather, and it's always right there ready to go. It's right there on the button, bam, you're there. This is probably what I'm trying to say with the whole video, is that it doesn't do anything that's never been done, but it does it as well as can be done as of the date it released. I did wish you could back the camera up during play. It sometimes does this on its own at specific scenic overlooks, which is nice. By the time I had 2 bows and 3 throwables, I started losing track of where all the items were. And it was a little unintuitive, to me at least, that you press R2 and then use the D-pad for some throwables like kunai and sticky bombs. But to use another kind of bomb, also thrown, you press, let me make sure I get this right, L2 left on the D-pad to select throwables, then circle to select black powder bomb. I feel like I'm putting in a cheat code here, and it's always during a fight. Obviously, that I would want to make these selections. An item wheel might have come in handy here, a la Horizon's Arrow Select. Even Odyssey's shift function could be customized so that you could have a stealth loadout and keep your open combat on a second loot loadout. One pleasant surprise with the upgrading is how assassinations became quick and easy like in Assassin's Creed, after it being so slow and painful. Like, difficult to watch. I like that the horses don't crash. Looking at you, Red Dead. Okay, so you can bow at dead bodies and Jin will say lines. I went most of the game before discovering that. The game starts with a long sequence teaching you how to be stealthy, and then spends the rest of the game making you feel bad for being stealthy. They do this through cutscenes, but also with the weather. So supposedly, playing stealthily actually causes storms to appear more frequently, though I've had storms pop up after very loud standoffs. Nonetheless, it's a neat touch. It's still the world of the game reacting to you versus just having characters react to things you say. So, one of my guilty pleasures in a game is collecting every outfit and dyeing it every possible color. See Breath of the Wild. The game teaches you pretty early that you can collect dyes from any of these identical merchants. And that's that. You think, okay, well that's how it works for the rest of the game. So, accidentally stumbling upon the white dye merchant was a genuine surprise, especially because it was towards the end of Act 2. I immediately spent all my money. I like the lack of caves. I hate caves. I hated cave missions in Odyssey. I hated cave missions in Far Cry Primal. I hated underwater missions in Black Flag and every other game. In Act 3, ascending Mount Jogaku was such a mashup of Far Cry 4's snowy DLC and Uncharted climbing. Sure, those are old mechanics, but it was still a challenge and more enticing since there was a clear goal to be had. The final secret move. So there are a few moves that you have to get by listening to stories and then completing the legends. This was the last one. When it told me I would earn a sword kit, and then I found that pillar up on the mountain, I assumed, okay, well that's the sword kit. But at the end of this mission, it revealed I'd earned a second sword kit. Izanami's Grief. Why am I talking about this one? Because that Lamborghini orange sheath and the blue striped handle, I was all, hello? Is it me? Speaking of sword kits, I got some major faves, like the Prowling Tiger, Omokare's Revenge, Yasha's Embers, and the Breath of Hachiman. You can tell that these were made with love, like someone wasn't just copy and paste in different colors here. They were crafting these. I would have liked to have that job. I'm not a fan of those detective-like segments where you find a magnifying glass prompt and then you just look around till you find another magnifying glass. We saw this in Witcher 3 and some of the recent Assassin's Creeds. In some recent games where you have to follow a path but tracks are invisible unless you get each check mark. I mean, don't get me wrong, if this actually made me feel like a detective, like anybody remember Deja Vu on the NES, then I'd be all for it. But this this is more like those hidden object games, which just frustrate me because I just end up tapping on everything until I break it. The game frequently guides you away and to slow down. But when it tugs at your kimono, it doesn't feel like distractions are there for filler. The wind guides you. Birds guide you. Foxes guide you. It invites you to slow down, but not like other games. It's not like in Red Dead 2, asking you to brush your horse in real time, wherein it offers a minimal boost to immersion and only rewards you in-game with the ability to continue at the current level of efficiency you were already at. When Ghost pulls you, you can politely decline by just continuing on your way. If you stop, however, and let's say, write a haiku, you are rewarded in-game with a vanity item in the form of a new headband. But I'd argue, by letting you have these moments of reflection, where you select your lyrics for a haiku and then hear Jin read them back to you, intercut with peaceful, stoic, beautiful camera shots, that we the player get an actual real-life benefit of perspective.
Cleanse yourself from pain.
See, Jin is stepping out of his exploration during a war, but we're stepping out of the game, so to speak. Life is hectic, life is busy, life can be unfulfilling, life can be 2020, but this This mechanic right here reminded me of a simpler time in my own life when I would walk through the woods, not for exercise, but for peace. I never even told anyone this, but I wrote a couple poems out there. Just being immersed in nature gives you so much perspective and pulls you above your current worries. Looking back, life wasn't necessarily simpler then, but those are the moments where it seemed like it was. And it's those moments, not the stress, that I carry with me still. I need to get back to the woods. The fact that I got this kind of inspiration perspective, the idea that I got it from a video game, I mean, we've come a long way from Pong. Crying out loud, all this existential crap, it's awesome. For the 4 years between its Broadway release and its streaming debut, I think I expected Hamilton to have invented new chords. Deep down, I imagine the choreography must be akin to magic, and the music must be made out of notes heretofore unheard by human ears. My imagination is limitless. Now, don't get me wrong, Hamilton lives up to the hype, but it was made of the same ingredients as any other story told with sight and sound. I'm not trying to say I could have made Hamilton. I mean, the tools to make it are available to everyone. Its dream is therefore an attainable one. You know, Robert Johnson was so skilled and innovative with the guitar that people decided he must have sold his soul to the devil to be that good. Sucker Punch, the developer, didn't sell its soul. I mean, how would I know if they did? They simply created a thing they love using parts from their beloved influences, some of which they wear right on their sleeve. If you haven't played Ghost of Tsushima, you might take all my rosy-eyed rhetoric and put it on some mystic platform of somehow demeaning every game that came before it. But far from that. It's a game that takes the best of so many crafts and creates a unique but familiar experience. Less of a Frankenstein's monster and more like the perfect anthology of greatest hits to bid the PlayStation 4 a fond farewell before welcoming its successor. The Classic Gamesman is a passion project brought to you by your own kind words and my love of the art form. If you'd like to see more like this, check out my other long-form reviews. And for something completely different, watch Cafe Ludo. If you like what I do, please consider subscribing and maybe watch one more of my videos.